And there is no shortcut to wiring all the neurons together. You have to do extreme repetition of that behaviour, because we've been telling people the same advice, pretty much giving them advice, and then expecting everyone to go and miraculously be able to form those habits on their own. At a macro level, we all look the same sort of shape, but at a microscopic level, we are all different at cellular level. And the same in the brain. The effort that I had to put in to try and tackle those 48 habits in my own routine was immense. I mean, it's hard. And I think there are a lot of people in denial who are sugar addicts who don't really realise.
Welcome to the Visionary podcast, where we discuss science, medicine, physical health, and mental well-being. On a practical level, how would I know if a certain habit has truly stuck in my brain biology so I can relax a little bit or not panic if I miss it a day or two? How would I tell?
I think it's sort of obvious within your daily routine that you just automatically start to do things. So on the underground, now I don't even think about it. My brain puts me on the escalator on the left-hand side, whereas I used to enter the escalator on the right-hand side and stand. Now I am all, before I even think about it, I'm on the left-hand side of the escalator. That is an automated habit that, sometimes I'm halfway up it and thinking, great, my brain put me on the left-hand side of the escalator. It's just happened. But there were a lot of, there is a long prolonged period, because even when you think you've got to the point where the habit is there, you'll then go on holiday or something changes, and so you're not in that routine for a while, and then you have to really focus on refreshing that. But because you're just really polishing up connections that are already pretty strong, it's not difficult to get that habit back in action again.
Yeah, I remember we were filming now on the third floor in Tunbridge Wells at the penthouse chambers, and I never use a lift now. I mean, the third floor is not, but the stairs are high.
I know, you just took me up there. It's like, oh God, how many flights are there?
I know, but I remember a year ago, it will take a bit of persuasion between myself, take the stairs, Hala, take the stairs. Yeah. But now there is no, even if I'm tired, underslept, or whatever, I do take the stairs without much effort in my head.
Yeah. So I worked with some property developers, pretty big property developers a few years ago, and we were designing new offices. And so they were showing me the designs, and I'm like, it looks amazing, guys. What an incredible glass and the foyer, and wow. Where are the stairs? Oh, the stairs are kind of like down the back here, past the lifts and the back. So
where you can't find them.
Yeah, where they're not. I'm like, why aren't they like the first port of call? So why aren't you embedding that? Because we've got this culture of, you go through the turnstiles and then you arrive at the lifts. And some of my clients, that was the habit that they picked, was to stop doing that and to use the stairs in the office. But there would be several days in the early weeks, and several weeks in the early days of trying to do a habit, and they would message me saying, "Oh, I suddenly kind of realised I was in the lift going up." When you're in, I'm in the lift, because that habit is so strong that you're not present. You're not present in that decision-making process, because it is very, very deeply automated. That is the behaviour. You press a button, you get into the lift, and then before you know it, I'm in the lift. So you'll know when it's been automated, because you'll be halfway up the stairs and you'll be, I'm halfway up the stairs. Or I'm halfway up the escalator. It's like, I'm on the left-hand side of the escalator. It's like, wow, I didn't even have to think about that. Whereas beforehand, I would be getting off the tube, walking through the tunnels going, on the left, on the left, on the left, on the left, till I got to the escalator and then got on the left. It's there is a light bulb moment where you've got right. This is starting to happen without me having to be involved
there's
in
no
the decision.
resistance, right?
There's no decision that has to happen.
Here's another thought. I'm 47. Do our brains retain the same capacity to change and to adapt, to rewire itself as we grow older? Can I still reinvent myself at any age?
Yeah, there's been a lot of studies around music in particular of people in their 80s and 90s learning instruments, learning piano, being in choirs, so having to learn lyrics of songs and learning language. So there's no expiry date on neuroplasticity. It's about how badly do you want to do it.
Yes,
that's are you prepared to put the effort in, and things like U3A, isn't it? The University of the Third Age, that they do a lot of language courses, and so older adults and retired adults can learn languages or learn new skills or learn any activity. If you sign up to a course and you pay for a course, because money is a great motivator,
I'll be there.
If you've paid for it, and if you're doing it in a group of people and you go for coffee afterwards with those people, and then it becomes a social thing or whatever it is, that benefit will happen at any age.
Going back to music again, you just mentioned music again, which is a brilliant motivation for you. You visited a Navy SEAL base in San Diego at some point in your life, and you saw how they incorporate music. Tell us about that experience. What did you learn there?
Well, that unexpectedly was a very pivotal point, because I was not meant to be on that US Navy SEALs base. I was at a university in California on a student exchange trip. I went from Cardiff University to LA, and while I was there, I got the opportunity to go to San Diego to visit this Navy SEALs base, and met the physical training instructors while we were there. We were swimming in this amazing, Olympic-sized swimming pool outdoors in the sunshine, and met these physical training instructors. And they started to. I was in a band and DJing, and they told me how they were using music within their work with the SEALs. We already. Yeah, you see it in films where they sing when they're on route marches, I don't care, it helps them keep going. And so they'd already started using music like that, but they were also using music to reduce anxiety in high pressure situations, to teach breath work, using music as a metronome, using music to increase physical endurance, and all of these things. I'm like, wow, I'd never, obviously I'd read that, the inner book of tennis psychology book, and then I had studied sport and exercise psychology during my degree. I'd never really thought that deeply about how, and I'd seen how music was being effective in tennis coaching and in sports coaching and in the sports environment, but their use of it just really grabbed me. And so when I came back to the UK, I did a master's degree in sport and exercise science in London. And I focused on the effects of music on the brain and on performance, which was then presented at the International British Association of Sport and Exercise Sciences, a very long mouthful, the annual conference, which then got published in the Journal of Sports Sciences. And then from that resulted in me working with the Olympic squads, where I introduced music as a training tool with the British swimming teams. And
the Olympic swimming team?
Yeah.
Okay.
Because music wasn't being used like that. This was in the 90s. Now
that was unheard of at the time.
You see all the swimmers come out with their headphones on now, right up to poolside. They've got their headphones on. They're using waterproof earphones during training in the pool. But back then it was it wasn't being used in that way. And so that's sort of kicked off everything. My PhD looked at the lifelong effect of music memories on the brain, which brought me back into health in the dementia space. And it's much more than entertainment. And over the last few generations, the music industry, rapidly evolved and positioned music as entertainment, as a product. But before that, it's just a part of being human. Is how we connected. It's how we communicated before we invented words.
It predates language and modern medicine.
Yeah,
right?
When we go back to the brain is in a black silent box, the skull. It's using the senses, the information it receives to figure out if we're in danger or not. Well, sound is our 360-degree radar. It's, we can't see what's coming behind, but we can hear it. It's a very important input channel to the brain. Yeah. And every sound, the molecules of air that are coming in, entering into the brain through the ear, through the auditory canal, but also through our skin, because it's vibration. Sound is vibration. So that's what is triggering the sensory input to the brain. And then the brain is trying to decode that to say, does this sound like something that's potentially dangerous? And if so, we need to activate the sympathetic nervous system, fight or flight response, get the heck out of here. Or does this sound like something that's probably safe? And that is all that is happening with sound, is this a sound of safety or is this a sound of danger? And then the answer to that question will determine whether the parasympathetic nervous system can continue to keep us chilled and digesting our food and ready for the next emergency, or if we need to activate the fight or flight response and flee or get into combat mode. And the music industry and Hollywood have harnessed this neurological effect to great success, because they figured out the type of music that makes us calm, because it mimics the sounds of safety.
Yes.
And they've also created music that mimics the sound of danger. So dangerous sounds tend to be, thundering hooves of a stampede, or high, lots of fast beats, or loud noises. That dangerous things in the environment tend to sound like that. Whereas safe things sound very different. They're not necessarily as noisy. They're calm, and we know this from even genetically. If you're handed a baby and you want that baby to be calm, you don't swing it around in the air screaming at it.
No.
You gentle movements and gentle sounds, slow, soft sounds. And so we know, we're not taught that. We know that instinctively, that certain sounds are potentially dangerous, certain sounds are safe, and that is what the brain is doing. So the reason that music is so powerful in health, not just elite performance, if we put elite performance to the side and just look from a health point of view, is because if you want your brain to be calm, then giving it musical sounds of calmness, and it doesn't have to be music, it could be sounds of a gentle stream that sounds safe, or the sounds of nature, right? It doesn't have to be music, but that is a very good way of telling your brain that everything's fine, and we can switch off that stress response that is often chronically activated due to our modern life and the pace of modern life. And music is so accessible now through our phones, and it's so easy to access music that it makes it a very simple biohack.
Hi, I'm Hala, your host today. If you're enjoying what you see, please hit that lovely subscribe button. It will mean a lot to us. Or maybe a small podcast now, but with your support, we can build this channel together, one step at a time. Thank you so much for being part of it. You reference dementia right now. I believe you've done some work with dementia on your PhD, and how music that we learned in our high hormone years of youth would affect our brain. Tell us about that, please.
Yeah, so I didn't. So when I started that, I didn't expect that it would lead me in that direction. But I was interested in the fact that music. So a lot of the artists that are selling out arenas, and they're now in their 70s and 80s, and they're still connecting with their audiences from youth. And I just became fascinated about why is it that we have such strong recollections of music experiences from our youth, and why is it that a Duran Duran song can come on the radio when I'm driving that I haven't heard for decades, and I can pretty much sing every word of it. How does my brain know all those lyrics after such a long time? And so what ended up happening is that PhD started opening up back to this long-term potentiation effect in the brain again. It's like, how do we learn things? That is the LTP process of
LTP?
Connecting long-term potentiation. Oh, yes. So connecting all the neurons together that are involved in that habit. Well, when it comes to music, if you look at how we as in my generations before me, the way we consumed music during our youth is that we would excitedly wait for our favourite bands to release a song.
It was never was an on-demand kind of thing.
No, we would wait, and then we would be down to the record shop, and we would buy the record, and we would take it home, and we would play it over and over and over and over and over. Yep. And the brain learns through repetition.
Yes.
So our music behaviour was a high frequency repetition behaviour. That is how we listen to music. So this means that for my generation and my parents' generation, they have very, very strong memories of that music because of the repetition. If you think about, if you draw a line and you just draw it once, like an indentation, there's not much there. If you go over that again, it'll be deeper. If you go over that again, it'll be deeper. If you go over it again, it'll be deeper. So we've got very, very deep and strongly embedded networks around those memories. And it'll be interesting to see, because this is why it's so powerful in dementia now, when people can't recognise their family, they can't recognise photographs of themselves, and yet you'll play them a song that was hugely popular during their youth, and they'll be able to sing along with it because those memories are still retrievable. I don't think that effect will necessarily work for future generations, because that isn't how we now consume music. We consume music. We have so much music accessible to us. We don't go and get a record and then play it over and over and over and over and over. Some super fans will. So the Swifties consuming Taylor Swift songs on repeat over and over and over will have very, very strong memories of that for the rest of their lives. But for people who are just grazing across playlists of lots of different songs and not really listening to music in that way, because we've now got such
huge
immense,
variety, right?
Immense amount of music. We're listening to each song much less. I don't think the effect that we're seeing in music and dementia now, I don't think that effect will work in future. But here's hoping we've solved the dementia problem like that anyway, and so then we don't need.
While you're talking, I got the impression that these songs are set somehow in my brain. The songs that I consumed in my early years of growing up, are they stuck in the brain somewhere?
Yeah, those memories are, deeply embedded.
Yeah.
So for definite, and things like, when so every day I do a quiz thing. It's my little brain health quiz, and I look at this thing, and a word will just come out, and it fascinates me because I think, God, I have never used that word. Like, how do I know that word? That word would have been used during my early years when I was learning vocabulary and we were having to do tons of reading and we were having to do spelling tests and all of that. I had learnt that word through repetition and never having, like yesterday, the word was skull, SCULL, and I was looking at it and I went, that's skull. And I'm thinking, I don't even 100% know when I learned that word, but that word is in there, right? So that there is so much content in the brain that we don't retrieve on a regular basis. Doesn't mean to say that those memories don't exist in there. And when you look at dementia, it's the ability to retrieve the memories. Not that the memories necessarily aren't stored somewhere. It's that activity to reignite the neurons that were involved in that, to recreate it in your brain.
Why did nature design us so we could hold on to these old memories, despite the fact that when we grow old, we forget the simplest things?
Yeah, well, but most of our behavioural memory is, a lot of it comes back to our survival. Like, it's useful to remember things that were good because they were usually safe. And it's also useful to remember things that were bad because they were potentially dangerous. And so you don't want to go near any of those things anymore. So that kind of survival instinct of, my mum died very suddenly a couple of months ago, very shockingly. She seemed in incredible health, bowel cancer lurking invisibly beneath the surface. And when you look at that grief process, it's like, oh, why is it so painful? Like, what is the evolutionary purpose of making this journey so bad? And it's to remind us to kind of look after the ones that are still alive, And so all of these processes, we have to keep reminding ourselves that we live in this modern world of the past, 50 to 100 years, very, very, very different existence to hundreds of thousands of years of evolution. We've got this brain that is still using the old operating system.
So even grief has a purpose in my brain to protect us.
Yeah, I think that, so I'm not an expert in the grief space, but I've just been, because I'm immersed in the hideous journey of it right now, there must be a purpose for it. It doesn't make sense for it to be like this. And my kind of rationalizing of it is that it just reminds you of the value of the people that still exist. Because we go along in our life, and you don't see your family and you don't see your friends because you don't have any time, and you rush, and I haven't got time to visit this person, I haven't got time to visit that person, and then you're dead. So it's a good reminder when you lose someone. And this happened with a friend of mine, a very good school friend a couple of years ago. She died exactly the same circumstances, same age as me. We were in school together. She was in the first band I was in. She was the drummer. Bowel cancer, no symptoms, within weeks, gone. And it's really brought the rest of us, my school friends, closer to get in contact. We're in contact all the time now because it sort of reminded everyone. It's like, why are we spending so much time working and chasing this and chasing that? It's and I think that particular, the bereavement and grief response is that because going back to survival, we were driven to be social animals because safety in numbers, right?
Yes.
It's about being with the family, being with other families, being in a community so that we were safer than when we were on our own.
And those of us whose parents maybe have failing memories, is there a way to use these youth songs to bring them back a little bit, even for a few minutes?
Definitely.
Yeah. How is that being done?
So there are quite a few organisations now that help you make playlists, and sometimes it's difficult because families sort of get to a point where they start using music very late, And so at that point, you can't ask the parent what are their most powerful songs, because that communication is no longer at that level of sophistication to be able to have that. So you're trying to figure out, okay, what were the songs that were huge hits when they were in school, when they were young? What were the big, most popular numbers, whether it's the Beatles or the Rolling Stones or whoever it was? But I always encourage people to start using music. If you've got any kind of dementia-related journey going on, to start using music as early as possible, because firstly it's a great workout for the brain, but also it forms that habit of having music in the daily routine, which means music will then become part of that daily routine from that moment on. And as the disease progresses, you can still use that music habit and that music within the routine to have that engagement with that person through those songs.
That is very beautiful. Yeah. I read somewhere that you collaborated with Universal Music on a project called Music Hacks.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm curious, what did that project entail?
Well, when I visited the Navy SEALs base decades ago in the 90s, and they showed me how they were using music as a metronome for different breathing exercises. Okay. And so I've kind of used that a lot through the years. And in particular, there is a breathing technique that if you exhale for longer than you inhale. So if you breathe in, say you breathe in 4 seconds, breathing in, and then 6 seconds breathing out, that is bringing you, that's a 10-second cycle of breathing in and out. And so that brings you to 6 breaths per minute, which for the majority of people, roughly around that breathing rate, is known as resonance frequency breathing, which is calming the autonomic nervous system and activating the parasympathetic branch of the nervous system, which is the calming one. So you're sending that signal that through my breathing, I'm in a safe space. We can dial back the stress response and start to train that system to be in parasympathetic mode, which is, that mode should be our dominant mode in our daily lives. It's difficult in the modern world, but it should be. So what I did with Universal is that I had started trying to do it myself with music by just creating music that had 4 beats in a bar, followed by 6 beats in the next bar, followed by 4 beats in the bar after that. So I basically put 2 extra beats in every other bar. So a bar would be, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, right? So, and then if you create music that has that kind of timing, then you can use it as a breathwork training tool so that people can breathe in for 4 in time to the music and breathe out for 6.
Incredibly clever.
So, because normally music, commercial music, popular music, pop music is 4/4. So it's every bar has 4 beats.
How do I get access to such music?
It's on Spotify and Amazon Music. Just
do I look for your name?
It's under either. I think it's under Dr. Julia Jones and it's under Music Hacks. Okay. HACKS.
And I can use that at bedtime.
Yeah, and there's we did it in lots of different styles. So but whatever your preferred type of music is, there's a track there. So pop rock, blues, Americana, country, soul.
And all genres can soothe my nervous system at the end of the day.
So these particular tracks are training tools to teach you the timing of the breath response, right? So if you want the maximum impact in that given moment, you would choose one of those training tools that was a calm. You wouldn't choose the rock version of those tracks, right? Because the rock version is sending a signal to your brain that you're potentially in a dangerous situation.
Action.
Whereas your breathing with the 4-6 ratio is telling your brain that you're in a calm. But if you want the maximum impact, you want the sound to be saying that you're in a safe situation and the breathing to be saying. So if you're out and about and you just want to practice the timing of that breathing, then you can pick any genre because it doesn't matter. It's just you're just practicing the timing. But if you're in a moment of stress and anxiety and you want to quickly calm down, then using the tracks that are more the chilled, like the chilled lounge versions of it will have the maximum impact.